It's the best boxing show on earth. How's that for an intro? Brief and to the point, right? You guys know I'm here on behalf of Boxing Monthly. If you haven't subscribed yet, you need to. A lot going on in this week. We're on a little hiatus. There's been some crazy developments, right? So we'll talk about some of that, some of the fights coming up this week, and we'll check out the fight between Kovalev and Chilemba, talk about that a little bit. Let's go, baby. So by now, obviously, you've probably heard about the fight announced between Gennady Golovkin and Kell Brook for September 10th. This really came out of left field. Nobody saw this one coming, even folks that are pretty closely tied to the Golovkin camp. Just didn't see this one coming. But now you look back and it makes a lot of business sense, right? You got, look, I made a video about this, talking about it in detail, about how the deal came together, but some of you guys have commented and given your own insight and added some good points as well. I mean, the big thing is just the time crunch, the HBO date that HBO is holding aside for Golovkin and everything. And for Brook, look, he's getting a substantially higher payday that he's ever received. So more to come on that fight. We'll talk more about it. A lot of you guys have asked how I see that fight going. And there's been some talk on Twitter about, is this going to be a destruction? Is it going to look like Khan when he moved up to fight Canelo earlier this year? My early preliminary thoughts, and I haven't really sat down and thought about this one too much, obviously, because it's a couple months ahead and anything can happen between now and then, but I don't see this as a one-punch knockout. And I certainly don't see it as a early blowout. I just don't see that. Styles make fights. Brook fights a lot differently than Amir Khan, and he's a lot stronger, sturdier of a guy. For Golovkin, obviously you got to favor Golovkin, and you got to favor him by stoppage, but I see it more of a slow, methodical beatdown happening in this fight. So I think it goes past the sixth round. I think it actually goes more than halfway, and I think you see an eventual, gradual beatdown. Of course, my feelings may change as we get closer and I think more and more about it and I watch some more footage of Brook and everything like that. But for right now, that's the way I see it. We'll talk more about that. If you haven't seen my video about Brook and Golovkin and my thoughts on it, make sure you check that out on my channel. It came out late Sunday night here in the States, early Monday morning overseas. So look on my channel and find that. Other news that just came out today, officially, they're saying, officially, non-officially, is that Manny Pacquiao is quote-unquote coming back, right? And they talked about this on Twitter. There were some stories. I think there was a story on Boxing Scene and a couple other places. Look, you guys know my opinion on this. Pacquiao, I don't see him as coming back because he never left. He never officially said he was retired. He never really fully committed to it. And he fought earlier this year. Now, personally, I thought he'd wait till next year to come back. I did not see this, but they're saying apparently he's going to fight in late October, early November. And the thoughts, the talk was that he would be fighting Adrien Broner, who obviously is with Al Haymon. Pacquiao's with Arum, but those two have patched things up this year, right? They've both had rough years financially, and they patched things up, and this would be a way for them to kind of get back into the money-making business here in boxing. But Adrien Broner has pretty much priced himself out of the fight. He's gone to Twitter and Instagram, of all places, bashing Bob Arum, saying that Arum wasn't paying him what he's worth and blah, blah, blah. Just to set the record straight on all that, Adrien Broner was set to receive, if the fight with Pacquiao did come off, he was going to receive a record high, career high payday for him. And obviously, it goes without saying, the hugest opportunity of his career. So for Broner to price himself out and then to bitch about it on social media, it shows how ignorant he is, the sense of entitlement he has, the ungratefulness he has. He's also overrated. I'm sorry. Just Adrien Broner, north of 135 pounds, not that good. Just not that good. And quality top 10 guy at 140, you could say, at 147. I don't even know if he's a top 10 at this point. I don't give a shit about Adrien Broner. So he can go away. To me, it just embodies the whole demographic thing, right? That's all I'm going to say about that. For Pacquiao, at this point, a lot of people are asking who he's going to fight. Probably Jesse Vargas. Now that Vargas is without a dance partner, he has a title. So you can see that happen. That would be an all Bob Arum show, obviously. But I wouldn't rule out somebody like Danny Garcia, who PBC hasn't mentioned anything about Garcia, what he's going to do, right? So that is a possibility. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. Garcia hasn't had a dance partner in a while. He wouldn't pose that big of a threat to Pacquiao as far as punching power and stuff like that. So perhaps we could still get the Arum-Heyman working together thing later this year with Pacquiao. But honestly, I'm not very excited or interested in anything Pacquiao does, just the same with Mayweather, unless he fights somebody that we care about. I would be moderately interested in a Broner fight just because of the personalities involved, and I think it would be an entertaining fight because of where both of those guys are at in this stage of their career. You can say the same thing for a Pacquiao-Danny Garcia fight. I'd be somewhat interested in that. Obviously, that promotion would be all about Freddie Roach and Danny Garcia's dad going back and forth and blah, blah, blah. But who would be the bad guy in that? I don't know. It's not Danny Garcia. It'd have to be his crazy daddy. But I'm not crazy excited about it. I mean, if Pacquiao came back and fought the winner of Crawford-Postal, I'd be interested in that one. Just the same as I'd be interested in Mayweather if he came back to fight Gennady Golovkin or one of the top guys, one of these young guys at 154 like Demetrius Andrade or someone like that. But we all know those fights won't happen. So I don't really give a shit at this point, right? Other than that, the same old news and notes. There's not a whole lot going on right now. We're kind of in the dog days of summer. We'll talk a little bit here in a second about Sergey Kovalev, Andre Ward, obviously. We'll review Kovalev's fight. But, just real quick, just talking about Kovalev Ward, if it does happen in November, it's supposed to happen. And obviously, everything went well with Kovalev earlier this week. Now, you expect Ward to just walk through Brand next month. The more and more I think about this fight, as far as giving a prediction, because a lot of you guys have asked about it, man, it comes down to the ref. If somebody like Kenny Bayless is the referee for that fight, I'm going to favor Ward. I'm going to favor Ward all day. If somebody like Tony Weeks is the ref of the fight, I might favor Kovalev by split decision or something like that. But as it stands right now, just those two fighters and what we know about both of them, their styles and everything else, you have to slightly favor Andre Ward based on a lot of reasons. But I won't go into it too much because, again, we'll talk about that in future videos. But primarily just because of styles and because of the boxing establishment here in the United States, HBO included, but the boxing media here, the old school boxing media and everybody else, they want Ward to win that fight. They would like Andre Ward to win that fight. And I think HBO has shown with some of their commentary and the way that they've negotiated fights and everything else that, they are giving Andre every opportunity to win that fight. So, just with the business and the politics of boxing at play and everything else, going into Kovalev Ward, I slightly favor Ward 55-45. But that may change depending on who the ref is for the fight. So more to come on that. Let's get into some fight reviews. Monday night in Russia, it was early Monday morning over here in Los Angeles. Sergey Kovalev wins a unanimous decision over Isaac Chilemba. The scorecards were a little wide based on what I was originally hearing on Twitter. And then when I watched the fight myself, I scored it 8-4 for Sergey. I had it 116-111. I think one of the cards had it that way, but a couple of them had it a little wider. Either way, it would be very, very hard. I was being as generous as I could, and I gave Chilemba 4 rounds. And I actually gave him 3 of the first 6 rounds. I had to fight even going into the 7th. It was the the 7th round where everything changed, where Sergey finally got through, and it was a left hook to the body while Chilemba was backing up, and then a straight right hand while he was retreating, just full out retreating. While Chilemba was on the move, that put him down and badly hurt him. And from that point forward in the fight, I thought Kovalev clearly controlled it. Even though Chilemba made a little rebound, I think in the 9th round, 10th round, it accounted well for himself. But a lot of people on Twitter, when the fight was happening live, and I couldn't watch it, I was working at the time, but they were saying that Kovalev looked really bad, and that they were amazed. And even the HBO commentary during the first 6 rounds of the fight, you know, Jim Lampley didn't have a very good night, I thought. I thought Roy Jones had a good night. He was seeing things early on that Jim Lampley just didn't see. The second half of the fight, Jim Lampley kind of woke up and started seeing everything clearly. But some of the commentary wasn't very good early on, and some of the Twitter messages I just didn't understand. You guys, if you've watched boxing for more than 5 years, if you've actually watched boxing for a long time, and you've seen these scenarios play out time and time again with tune-up fights before a big super match, rarely, very rarely, does the tune-up fight look overly impressive, especially if the A-side fighter is taking on a fighter that's tough, that mirrors the guy they're going to be fighting down the road. There's a few factors at play here. Well, first of all, Chilemba is a top 10 light heavyweight. For those of you who don't know that and don't realize that, he is. He's a legitimate top 10 light heavyweight. Now, light heavyweight is not the deepest division right now. It's very top heavy. But you look at the other top light heavyweights with Alvarez. I think Alvarez, the guy that is Stevenson's mandatory, barely got by Chilemba, and a lot of people felt Chilemba was robbed in that fight. I think that was last year. Don't quote me on that. It might have been early this year. I don't quite remember off the top of my head. But so Chilemba gave him a rough fight. Chilemba fought tooth and nail with Tony Bellew before Bellew moved up to cruiserweight, right? I think he would give Adonis Stevenson absolute fits. Absolute fits. If guys like Andres Fonfara could give Stevenson fits, I certainly think Chilemba would. This guy's quality. He might be a top 5 light heavyweight. If you don't agree with me, name 5 light heavyweights right now that you would favor to clearly beat Chilemba. I can't. I can't name 5. So for Sergey to not blow the guy away is expected. As soon as the fight was signed, I thought this thing is probably going a distance. It's at least going 9 or 10 rounds. I absolutely thought that. For Sergey to put down Chilemba was pretty impressive to me, especially at that point in the fight, because it was a very close competitive fight at that point. That impressed me. He'd only been down once before, early in his career. At the point of his career where Chilemba was an experienced veteran fighter, to my knowledge, he hasn't been put down. And he's been in there with top opposition. To me, that was a factor. Also the factor that Sergey was fighting in his home country, where he hasn't fought in over 5 years, I believe. And the last time he fought there, in that very same arena over there in Russia, which that city that it's in is not that far from where Sergey Kovalev grew up as a boy. The last time he fought in that ring, he killed a man. So there were a lot of factors here, not to mention the fact that him and John David Jackson wanted to get rounds in and work on some things with Chilemba. Not only that, but here's the biggest thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about. Nobody in the media has talked about this. You know Andre Ward's watching. You don't want to show him your whole deck of cards. You're playing poker, okay? You're bluffing a little bit. You don't want to show your whole fucking hand. No one's talked about that. Was that the 100% best version of Sergey Kovalev Monday in Russia? Hell no. Now, Sergey Kovalev on his best night still gets hit by Isaac Chilemba. He's a tough fighter. He's a good fighter. He still struggles early. I won't say struggle, but he's still, it's a competitive fight early on. But Sergey on his best night in 100% condition, 100% shape, stops Chilemba late in the fight. That's what happens. That would be my prediction. I think stamina was a factor here. I think Sergey, after that 7th and 8th round where he spent a lot of energy, he looked to take the 9th and 10th round off to me. He looked like he had just made up in his mind that this is going 12, and he was cool with that. He had a late burst at the very end of the 12th round to make a point and put a stamp on it for the fans there at his home country where he had grown up. But he did not look 100% to me, man. And I don't know what you guys expect in a tune-up fight like this. If he went out there and tried to blow this guy away and ended up getting cut, injured, put down, anything, who the hell knows, man? We've seen guys go out in tune-up fights and get starched and blow huge, huge paydays. So, look, Ward's going to fight Alexander Brand next month. Brand is a horrible opponent. Someone like Chilemba is light years above Brand. I wouldn't put it past Andre Ward to stop Brand. He's that level of opponent. He's probably worse than Paul Smith. Maybe not the version of Paul Smith that Andre Ward fought, but possibly. But even that being said, Ward's going to work on some things and go rounds with Brand in his tune-up fight. It's going to be the same thing. And you're going to hear Kovalev fans and Andre Ward haters bashing Andre Ward when the fight with Brand goes too long. All of you guys need to chill out and relax. You're going to get the best version of Kovalev and the best version of Ward when they fight, if they fight this November. I'm still not 100% convinced. I still have a sneaking suspicion that Andre Ward's going to get injured, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, before that fight and it gets pushed to next year. That's just a feeling I have. But hey, I've been wrong about these things a million times before. So for right now, all systems go. Sergey Kovalev wins. It doesn't look amazing, but got in 12 great rounds of work. He's got plenty of footage that him and John David Jackson can sit down and watch with a guy that, Andre Ward is hard to emulate in sparring, but Isaac Chilemba might be one of the closest things to it that you can get right now. And this wasn't sparring. This was a real prize fight. So this was a great, great tune-up for Sergey Kovalev. So we've got some action around the world this weekend in boxing with some fights coming up. But the biggest fight and the most important fight is probably Deontay Wilder going up against Chris Arreola. Now, I know a lot of you have gone back and forth with me about this one and the whole situation with Deontay Wilder and Alexander Povetkin and all that good stuff. Look, again, you guys know my position on all that. Love it, hate it, whatever. Povetkin failed a drug test, an A sample, B sample. Fight was postponed. That wasn't Deontay Wilder's decision. That was the sanctioning organization, the parties involved, postpone the fight. Povetkin, since WADA has made a ruling, VADA has done a retest, everything's been cleared and okayed. They've determined ultimately that Povetkin wasn't in the wrong because the levels of meldonium he had in him were under the threshold, and he was doing it last year and in years past, but it was technically legal back then. So look, there's a lot of gray area here. That fight will probably still happen down the road if both sides drop their lawsuits. If they don't, the fight will never happen. But all that's on the shelf for right now. And you have a situation with Deontay Wilder, kind of like the situation Golovkin and Brook were just in, where they were left without a dance partner. They had a TV date. What do, right? You've invested well over $1 million in training and traveling and all these expenses. You just sit on the sidelines, or do you fight? So they got him a fight with Chris Arreola, who is not deserving of this title shot, hasn't been deserving of the last couple title shots he's had, but he has a very, very good relationship with Al Haymon. He's one of Al Haymon's first real signees going back years and years. And the WBC has had a hard-on for Chris Arreola because he's of Mexican heritage. And the WBC will do anything. They'll gut an old lady in the street and leave her to die to get a Mexican a title. That's just what that organization does, right? So here it is again. Chris Arreola is fighting for that title. All that being said, I do think it's going to be an entertaining, fun scrap for a few rounds. I think Chris, all reports, all indications from camp is that he's in shape. Look, he's more mature now. He realizes he's got to stay in somewhat decent shape per his standards. And he is a scrapper, he's a fighter, he's a real, true, hardened boxer, professional boxer who knows his craft. He's gonna go in there and give it to Deontay for a few rounds. But eventually, Deontay's gonna clip him down. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Deontay gets nailed at some point early on and maybe even wobbled. Who the hell knows? It would be interesting, it'd be fun. But this is going to be in Alabama, in front of his hometown fans. It's going to be another big, passionate crowd, which is something PBC needs more and more of. I think that they've really done it right when it comes to putting Deontay Wilder on in fights in his home state. They could do better promoting of him just as a personality. But, I'm going to be watching this fight. I think it'll be fun. But I'd say by the middle rounds, Wilder clips him down and scores a knockout. Wilder and Anthony Joshua are kind of going to start being talked about together. You got a British, you got an American, both undefeated. But make no mistake about it, if they were to fight today, I think Wilder would win. I wouldn't rule Anthony Joshua out of that fight, but Anthony Joshua is a prospect with a paper-thin title. And not even a good, nice, hard stock paper you use to print your resume. I'm talking about that origami paper, okay? That's how thin that title is. Wilder's title isn't much thicker. It's a paper title too, but it's that resume paper. So it's a little bit better. And Deontay does have more pro fights, albeit against pretty shitty competition for the most part. But he just has more experience as a professional at this point, right? He's a little further along. But they're both young guys with titles, and they both have the new modern heavyweight body that Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko, that prototype, right? So these guys are going to be compared for a while now. And Anthony Joshua just scored an impressive, dominant knockout. So now it's up to Deontay Wilder to get in there and do the same thing. And he knows that. He's got to keep up with him. Right? So it's kind of like Golovkin and Canelo right now, right? So hopefully Deontay keeps that in mind. It doesn't let the pressure of fighting at home get to him, stays controlled, and gets himself a big, decisive knockout win in this fight. I think he will. Now, in the co-feature of that card, Sammy Vasquez has a fight. I'm mildly interested in that one. I think it could be a pretty good scrap, but it's not the best matchup in the world. Over in the UK, Guillermo Rigondeaux is fighting an opponent I don't care about. That's another fight that I'm just not very excited about. Terry Flanagan, the lightweight titleist, is fighting an ancient Zunki Fana. So there's a couple of other fights going on. I'm just scrolling through the schedule here right now on my phone. Nothing major that I can see around the world. Some names I recognize. You know what's really sad, though, as I'm looking at this? On the untelevised portion of that Wilder card, man, Vic Darchinyan is fighting. Vic Darchinyan's fighting. This guy should not be fighting anymore. I've talked about this before, man. Somebody in his camp needs to have a serious talk with him. Should not be fighting. I'm getting sick of saying that, but it's just a problem we've had in boxing for a long time. And you'd think that type of problem with the medical advances that we have and the checks and balances that these guys have to go through, you'd think that problem would be less and less, but it still seems to be an issue in boxing that pisses me off. But let me know what you guys think, man. We got some more boxing later in the month, some big fights coming up to talk about. So after this little hiatus, this little lull in the schedule, things are going to pick back up. And I'll see you guys next week.